Brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Sulky Threads. Express yourself with Sulky and create with confidence.
Welcome to Quiltmaker's Block Network. I'm Eileen Fowler from Quiltmaker magazine, and today we're going to be talking about Whoopsie Daisy, block number 417, a block I designed for Quiltmaker's 100 Blocks Volume 5. For this 12-inch foundation block, you're going to need 3 fabrics: a pink batik for the petals of the flower, a green for the background, and an orange for the flower center. You'll also need some foundation sections. You'll need 4 copies of the foundation section and 4 copies of the foundation section reversed. I often use just plain copy paper for this, or you can use vellum, which is nice because it's easy to see through, or something like this newsprint. The fabric requirements you'll need are on your screen. I'm going to show you a couple of methods for cutting out adequate size patches for your foundations. One method is to use templates to make your foundations. I start with my foundation piece sections, and I have a piece of freezer paper that I will use a light box to trace the patches onto the freezer paper like I've done here. And I've added an extra ½ inch all the way around the traced pattern piece. That'll give me an adequate size for cutting the patch. Then I cut out the foundation from the freezer pattern and iron it to the wrong side of my fabric. This is patch number 1, which is used for the petal of the flower. It's on the back side, the wrong side of the fabric, and I just iron it on. It'll stay in place, and you can reuse the foundation. You can reuse the freezer paper on several different patches. So that's one method. Another method I use is a tool called an Add Enough ruler. This is designed by CM Designs. They also make the Add a Quarter ruler. And what you need to do is use this as a little ruler. You line up the bottom edge of the ruler and the right edge of this ruler with the highlighted areas of the patch I've shown here. And you can see the far edge of this highlighted patch comes to about 4½ inches on this ruler. And I always add an extra ½ inch for insurance. And then I look up to the top edge of this patch, which is right at 3½ inches. I add an extra ½ inch. And that should give me an adequate size for my patch. And I just write this down so I'll remember what size to cut. This is a great technique for cutting rectangles and squares quickly to make your patches for foundations. Now we're going to foundation piece. So we start off with my first foundation section and my first patch, which is the pink petal that I've lined up behind on the wrong side, the unprinted side of the foundation. And I make sure that I have at least a ½ inch all the way around this first patch area before I pin it in place. And then I'm going to trim off the first seam line. So I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to use my Add Enough because it's nice and thin, and line it up next to that first line between the foundation piece 1 and 2. Fold back the paper, use my Add a Quarter ruler, which is also from CM Designs. It's got a little lip on here, so it'll butt up right next to the edge of the paper. And then I'm going to just trim off the seam to make sure that I have an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Now I'm going to get ready to sew on patch number 2. I've got patch number 2 raw edge lined up with the seam line I just cut on patch number 1. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew a couple of stitches beyond that line, sew all the way through that line and a couple stitches beyond that. Flip the foundation over, then I take it to my ironing board. I press the patch open. Now we're ready to add the third patch. We'll want to fold back on the line between patch number 1 and patch number 3. I'll use my add enough ruler for that, fold it back, use my add a quarter ruler to butt it right up against the fold, and I'll trim off to make my seam allowance. I'll line up the third patch along that edge, take it to my sewing machine, flip it over, and I'll sew a couple of stitches beyond that line, through the line, and a couple of stitches beyond the line. Then I take it to my ironing board, I press the patch open, and the third patch is done. When you've sewed all of the patches on there, you've got patch 4, patch 5, patch 6, and patch 7 now sewn on. Your section will look like this. It's a little funky looking, but we'll just turn it over and take it to your mat, trim off all the extra paper and all the extra fabric along the outside seam line. Once all the paper, excess paper and fabric are trimmed off around all sides, this is what the back side of the foundation will look like. And we'll flip it over, and that's a completed section. To assemble the Whoopsie-Daisy block, you'll need the reverse foundation section with a regular section. Sew those two together to make a quadrant like this. Sew those together to make a half a block that looks like this, and then sew the upper half to the bottom half. And your finished block will look like this. Little tip, you'll see that the foundation papers are all still on here. I've pressed the seams open, which helps decrease the bulk. And to rip off the papers, you just need to grab a piece of paper, kind of fold it back on itself, and rip. Okay, here's an example of Whoopsie-Daisy used in a pillow. And here's an example of Whoopsie-Daisy used with 3 other blocks that I designed, which are seasonal blocks: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Whoopsie-Daisy and 99 other creative blocks are available in Quiltmaker's 100 Blocks Volume 5. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again soon for Quiltmaker's Block Network. It's lunchtime for Carolyn. We got to get through this one. The end!